You look at yourself in the mirror and ask, who is this person? Do I really know myself? Or am I just playing a role for others? For Sartre, this doubt is not a flaw, but the first step in starting to discover yourself. Imagine the following scene. You are on a stage, the spotlight is on you, and the curtain rises. The audience watches you, eager for your performance, but there's a crucial detail. No one gave you a script. The lines, the gestures, the direction of the play. Everything depends entirely on you. This is existential freedom for Sartre, a total and inescapable responsibility for one's own existence. We are not born with an instruction manual, a predefined destiny, or an immutable essence. We are, according to the philosopher, condemned to be free. This condemnation, at first, may sound paradoxical, but it reveals a fundamental aspect of the human condition. Being free, in this sense, is not just about being able to choose between chocolate or strawberry ice cream. It is being the author of your own life, the creator of your own values, responsible for every decision, and, consequently, for who you become. This total freedom, however, can generate anguish. Think of that moment when you had to make an important decision, changing jobs, ending a relationship, choosing a new career path. The number of possibilities, the uncertainty of the future, the lack of guarantees, all of this can weigh on your shoulders. This anguish, for Sartre, is not a sign of weakness, but rather the acknowledgement of our freedom. And it is precisely this responsibility that often scares us. It is easier to follow a pre-existing script, accept the social roles imposed on us, follow others' expectations. In this way, we avoid the weight of freedom, the anguish of choice, and the responsibility of being the sole authors of our existence. But by fleeing from our freedom, we fall into another trap that Sartre calls bad faith. And it is these masks that we use to avoid freedom that we will explore in the next section. Reflect for a moment. When in your life do you feel the weight of freedom the most? And how do you deal with this anguish? Have you ever felt like an actor on a stage, playing a role that doesn't fully represent you? Sartre would call this situation bad faith. Bad faith in Sartre's context is not simply lying to others, but above all, deceiving oneself. It is the attempt to escape the anguish of freedom by denying our own capacity to choose and clinging to predefined roles. Imagine, for example, someone who defines themselves exclusively by their work. I am a doctor, I am a teacher, I am a businessman. While profession is an important part of one's identity, reducing oneself to just that is a form of bad faith. It is as if the person is saying, I am not free to choose who I want to be, I am just my professional role. Similarly, a woman who defines herself solely as a mother or a man who sees himself only as a provider may be falling into the trap of bad faith. These social roles, though important, do not exhaust the complexity of being human. We are beings in constant construction, with multiple possibilities and radical freedom. Bad faith also manifests in our tendency to find excuses for our actions. I did this because it was my duty. I expected this of myself. I had no choice. These seemingly harmless phrases may hide an escape from responsibility. By attributing our actions to external factors, duty, social expectations, circumstances, we absolve ourselves from the responsibility of being the authors of our choices. But for Sartre, this escape is illusory. Even in the most adverse circumstances, the freedom of choice remains. We may not control what happens to us, but we always have control over how we respond to what happens. Bad faith, therefore, is a form of self-deception that prevents us from living authentically. It is a mask we wear to hide the fundamental emptiness of existence, the absence of a predefined essence. But what is this fundamental emptiness, and why is it so important for Sartre's philosophy? Let's find out in the next section. But what is this fundamental emptiness, and why is it so important for Sartre's philosophy? Let's find out in the next section. We are initially nothing, and it is precisely this nothing, this fundamental emptiness, that grants us radical freedom. This absence of essence, this original emptiness, can generate anguish. It is the existential void, the feeling of lack of meaning, the perplexity before the question, what is the purpose of my life? We often try to fill this emptiness with external things: material goods, social status, superficial relationships, constant distractions. We desperately seek a ready-made meaning, something that tells us who we are and where we should go. But for Sartre, this search is in vain. The meaning of life is not out there waiting to be discovered. The meaning of life is something we create for ourselves at every moment, through our choices and commitments. The fundamental emptiness is not, therefore, a defect to be corrected, a flaw to be filled. It is, on the contrary, the condition of possibility for our freedom and authenticity. The fundamental emptiness is, ultimately, the space where authenticity can flourish. But how can we build ourselves from this emptiness? And how can we live authentically in a world full of masks and social expectations? Take a moment now to reflect on your own emptiness. Have you ever been confronted with this feeling of lack of meaning? And how have you dealt with this emptiness in your life? Imagine yourself as a craftsman with a block of clay. The clay, by itself, is nothing. It is just matter, pure potentiality. But in the hands of the craftsman, the clay can transform into an infinite number of forms: a vase, a sculpture, a functional or purely aesthetic object. For Sartre, we are like that clay. We are born as pure potentiality, as open beings, without a predefined form. And it is through existence, through our actions and choices, that we shape, build, and define ourselves. This is Sartre's famous phrase, "Existence precedes essence." In other words, we first exist, then we become who we are. This responsibility can be frightening, but it is also liberating. It means we are not bound to a predetermined destiny, to a set of fixed and unchangeable characteristics. We can transform, reinvent, and become who we truly want to be. The construction of the self is a continuous, unfinished process that extends throughout life. With every choice, every action, every commitment, we are defining who we are and who we want to become. Reflect now on your own self-construction project. How have you shaped yourself throughout life? What choices and actions have contributed to who you are today? And who do you wish to become in the future? Imagine yourself in a mirrored room, surrounded by reflections of your own image. At first, this may seem fascinating, even narcissistic, but after a while, the constant repetition of the same image can become suffocating, limiting, imprisoning. For Sartre, the gaze of the other works like a mirror. When we are looked at, judged, categorized by others, we see ourselves objectified, reduced to an image, a label, an external definition. This experience of the gaze of the other is what Sartre calls shame. Shame is the awareness of being an object for the other, of being seen and judged from the outside. It is the realization that our freedom is being limited, conditioned by the way others see us. But despite this, shame can also be an opportunity for self-discovery. By noticing how others see us, we have the chance to reflect on how we see ourselves and what it means to be authentic. Ultimately, authenticity does not mean fleeing from the gaze of the other, but recognizing that our freedom is not nullified by that gaze. We can be free, even when seen, even when judged.